Hello. Welcome back to the Autistic Tidbits and Tangents podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Kara Dymond. I'm an autistic teacher and university lecturer and author from Toronto, Canada.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bruce Petherick. My day job is autistic advocate at Autism Canada, and I'm pretty exhausted.
Me too. That makes two of us. So we've promised each other we're going to make this one a shorter one, which by our standards will probably still be an hour, but we'll do what we can. So today we're going to be talking about special schools and our thoughts all around that.
Welcome to Autistic Tidbits and Tangents.
Candid conversations between autistic off-hour professionals.
Cool.
Trigger warnings for this episode are related to schools, neoliberalism, special education, racism, all the isms actually, segregation, and lack of supports. Before we begin, I do have an update from Maya. So let me read this. It's on my phone. Just bear with me. Hi to all our wonderful listeners. I miss doing the podcast so much. To be honest, I miss doing a lot of things that my life used to involve. These days, it is all about baby M, 24/7, as it should be. It is really tough in several ways, but also an amazing journey. I know all parents say this, but my baby is so cute and fun and such a charmer. She currently has a very developmentally appropriate tendency to put everything in her mouth. This includes, but is certainly not limited to, her toys, muslin cloths, mom's hands, her books, mom's phone. I've not let her, as phones are really hard to clean well enough. Her clothes, especially hoods, and mom's hair. Actually, anything to do with me tends to be top of the list. Life with a baby is simultaneously super fun and incredibly boring. Watching her figure things out, the many, many poop jokes that are suddenly funny, making her smile, awesome. The repetition and never having a moment to oneself, less awesome. We are starting her in daycare in January with the hope that she takes well to it. If not, we will stop and try again later. But if it works well, I will be able to do some chores and get a shower every day without her crying for me to get back ASAP, that is. The hope right now is somewhere between 2 and 4 hours most days. Wish us luck. In the meantime, we take walks in the cold weather, sing silly songs, and try to learn how to sit. Sounds idyllic when I put it that way, doesn't it?
Oh, I remember.
You remember those days?
Yes, and I'm not the mom, and I don't mean that in any negative way whatsoever. Just that there is that bonding that that does happen between the mother and the child, which is But I remember I remember some of those times of just doing things over and over again and not being able to do anything else because you're too scared. If you leave the room, the little one's going to do something. And you know what? 99.9999% of the time, it doesn't happen. But yeah. And I'm thinking about that in a wistful way, maybe.
With the distance of time, I'm sure it seems really, really like lovely times, lovely memories, that time you never get back. But I'm sure going through it right now, not having any time for herself, especially as an autistic person, I can only imagine how short of spoons she is. And I know she's like me in a lot of ways, especially wanting to get out there, do things, a million ideas, a million book ideas, a lot on the go. And that's got to be hard to put that kind of thing on the back burner.
So all I'm going to say is you'll look back in 23 years and find it all very amusing.
I'm sure.
Now I have other problems, but yes.
All right. So we're talking about special schools. Do you want to tell us? Okay, we'll start with thing of the day because It was an
This is where
article
this
that
comes from.
prompted this question. So why don't you tell us what that was?
So Kara will hopefully put the link in the show description. And this is an article from the ABC, which is the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. It used to be called by something else just for a second, which is the national television of Australia. And it was talking about an idea in Australia to close down all special schools. Sorry. And there's a lot of the Australian government's going through a lot of changes to the way disability is handled in Australia, called the NDIS. That's irrelevant to this, but they talked about the closing down of the special schools, and the article gives the commission who's looking into this their view, and then some really quite strong opinions from some caregivers, and it raised something with me and this is the point for our discussion today on what do I think of special schools, and what does Kara think of special schools, and what do I think about closing special schools. So I am fundamentally I want education to be inclusive. And I'm not comfortable in general with segregated education. So there's my statement straight away. So Kara, your turn.
This is a hard one because yes, I believe in inclusion. I want inclusive education to work. Do we do it well enough? No. Do I think that any student is standard? Do I think they're all standard? No. So I absolutely understand that one setting might not be sufficient for everyone. I want that setting to have the resources and everything that it needs, and the teachers and education workers to have what they need to support everyone. I know that my younger brother did not do well in public education and was really well supported in a private school with, maybe 8 kids in the class. I know that I teach a program where my students spend some of their week integrated in inclusive settings and some of the time they're with me. And I know that I've had students say, like, here I don't feel autistic, and I've said this, and what they're really saying is they don't feel like they're outsiders. So there's definitely benefit to having settings where you relate more to everyone, your needs are recognized, you have commonality of experience. So my heart is in inclusive education. But I also would never begrudge anyone for accessing other settings if their child is not included or adequately supported. I see value in different models. I don't think we perfected the model that we have now.
And so this is why this is a discussion. And I would very much encourage listeners and viewers to drop a comment below, subscribe. This is actually something that Kara and I are speaking, I think, from an educational perspective here, and my views are basically exactly what Kara's just said. I want everybody to be included. And I think the program that you work in, Kara, where some of the students are taken away but then integrated, I still think of that as inclusive in a lot of ways.
I wish that just happened with everyone. I wish you had like a home room in the morning, and then students went where they needed to go, and everyone left for other things. So you need more math attention. You go, you need more of this. You go to that, like where it's not only certain people are leaving the room to access different things. It's no, everyone is getting help with what they need. And there's no stigma attached to leaving the room.
I had a big spiel, well, not a big spiel, but a tiny spiel, but you're raising another flip side to this. I had a quick look through educational standards in Alberta, BC, and I know the Ontario one. And when we talk about special education, I want to make clear that special education and special schools are not the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
A special school tends to be segregated and almost, okay, just they say segregated. In other words, the students stay, that's the only place that they go to. Special education is, and here's the thing that's weird, are for those people with some learning challenges in the regular classroom. Actually, let me read. I'm going to read. I think I've got where are we here? I had this completely planned, didn't I? Here we go. So this is a policy statement from the government of British Columbia, and I know this is similar in other provinces. So what they define as special education are those people who are physically dependent or deafblind, moderate to profound intellectual disability, physical disability or chronic health impairment, visual impairment, deaf or hard of hearing, ASD, and then there's what they call the third level, the intensive behavior interventions or serious mental illnesses. Now, here's the other scary thing. It also includes gifted education.
That's the same here. I mean, we consider them categories of exceptionality. So intellectual would be a category. So it would span the full range, giftedness, MID, intellectual impairment, communication disorders, which of course include autism, expressive or receptive language challenges. I forget what else is under, but they're categories. So behavior, multiple exceptionality would be if you have needs in multiple areas. There's the physical. I feel like I'm missing one, but what's interesting is ADHD is not considered to fall in any of those categories, because I think the funding implications would be pretty exorbitant if schools had to recognize ADHD as an exceptionality worthy of additional funding.
And that's so in Alberta, ADHD is sort of part of special education. Students students with ADHD get IEPs in Alberta. They don't get them here in BC, but as I've said before, specifically in Metro Vancouver, the idea of IEPs is pretty fluid.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, anybody who needs accommodations or anything special gets them within reason,
as they should.
And that's sort of I'm seeing with both my younger kids, both with ADHD. I'm seeing how you still have some teachers who are a little. Some of the teachers are still set in their ways, but the board is looking at expanding. So that's okay. It's a growing procedure. So, so here's my problem about the special school aspect, and I want to grab into the gifted as well. Is that much as I would want education to be inclusive, I know there are students who would flourish better in a special school, and the disruptions to the other students would be better for their education as well, with certain students going to a special school. Now, I want that exception to be really, really super tiny, and I think that's my problem.
Yeah.
Like if you allow special schools, why aren't we just keeping them broad? What do you think?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, like I could totally see it being broadly applied, like a school where anyone for whom, and actually we do have things like this in some of the Toronto school boards, do have alternative schools. So it's still a public school, but then the students who tend to enroll in it, like they don't have to live in the catchment area, is my understanding. And so there might be one where it's, it could be learning disability related. It could be, a lot of the students might be LGBTQ plus community members or have family members who, like, and so although they are certainly represented and welcomed in other schools, having one setting where everyone is very similar to you or from similar communities. It's just a different vibe, I guess. But I think you could have special schools that are for anyone who's a little bit marginalized in traditional education. I think there's such a commonality of experience and commonality of need. I was reading a book by Zaretta Hammond, and it's on culturally responsive pedagogy and the brain. That might even be the title, but I'm just speaking from memory. So it's close to that. I think it came out in 2015 or 2018. And her focus is predominantly on BIPOC learners, Black and Indigenous, especially Black, and the achievement gap. And she talks a lot about how the gap continues to grow, because what ends up happening with these learners is they are denied opportunity for like cognitively rigorous work. The assumptions, the expectations for them are lower. They're deprived of opportunities to develop critical thinking skills that they will need later. So other students are learning those things. That this is part of what she says. It's not all of what she says, but all of her recommendations for how to engage learners, especially marginalized learners in that respect. When I was reading through, I was like, these are the things that I say to do for autistic learners and learners with ADHD. And like, so often what happens is we deny experiences, we deny support, we deny encouragement to learners who are seen as like lower on the bell curve. And, I have huge issues with the bell curve thinking in education, which is the idea that there's a small subset who are at the very top. There's a large subset that's sort of middle achievers, and there's a small subset that are underachievers, and that's just where they fall, right? Like, oh, that's, nothing you can do. They're the F learners, and these are the C students, and these are, but if you were to map like reward systems and who gets the rewards, this is something that I've thought, it's like the ones who always get the rewards are that small few who are the gifted learners, let's call them. Then there's the middle section who sometimes do, sometimes don't. And the ones who are routinely deprived of those opportunities of rewards, of going on field trips, experiential learning, all of these things that would actually help them stay engaged, connect to background knowledge, develop background knowledge, the things that neurologically we know learners need to do. They don't get those chances.
I need to write a point, because I think I need to challenge you on one thing.
Sure,
but
please.
It's a later point. It's interesting you bringing up a cultural element, and actually the LGBTQ, and I'm thinking very specifically trans right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting idea. And also, let me state that I'm not sure if this happens in other cities, but there is a school in Calgary that is fundamentally, it is only for pregnant teenagers.
Oh, wow.
And I'm trying to remember if the partners are involved as well. So this school, it's only mainly, I think it's mothers. So I'm sorry, my memory's a little bit about that. All it is teenagers, female teenagers with children. And the school is up special like that. Some of the schools I used to teach in actually had childcare.
Wow.
Not for the teachers, but for some of the students. And that's another. Well,
I mean, there are so many challenges with finishing education if that happens in your teenage years, right? So I could see that being a conducive environment, a more understanding environment, more flexible environment. Interesting.
Anyway, so that's just an example of another type of special school.
We have an Afrocentric school in Toronto. That's what it's called.
I was just going to think about that.
Yeah.
Now that's interesting because I think I live in a very multicultural area, as do you. But the multiculturals it's a very predominantly Indian diaspora, mainly Sikh population. That's the area I live in. There's lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of people. And so a lot of kids at school either come from that background or Eastern Asia. And so it's kind of interesting that there is a strong cultural element at my kids' school, which is coming from the socioeconomic background of the community rather than anything specially set up.
Yeah.
And this is the part of the special schools that I love, where this school in 25 years, so you see pictures of the people who graduated.
Yeah.
And in the 60s and 70s, it's a whole bunch of Anglo. Sometimes you get Ukrainian names, but it's a very white school. And now it's not at all, which is kind of cool. And in 25 years, as populations just naturally move in different ways, who knows what's going to happen? And I love that flexibility, and I love the fact that the staff in that school are really aware. And how multicultural their approach is. And that's interesting compared to some schools I've taught at the other place, where there isn't that much of recognition of the cultural diversity of the students, and not in a negative way, but not being celebrated. Toronto, I think, is a different problem, and I love the fact there's an Afrocentric school, because I think there's a bigger. Is there a bigger race problem when it comes to that sort of stuff, or is it more socio? What do you think?
Well, I mean, it's very much linked, right?
Yeah. Oh, yes, of course.
I mean, I do think if you look at school board data, I don't know about my school board, but I would imagine it's similar to the Toronto District School Board, and they do collect race-based data, and we still have a problem in school boards with who is suspended, who is expelled, graduation rates, right? So there is a race problem for sure, because I think once, and this makes sense also through the lens of neurodivergent learners, and of course, many neurodivergent learners are also Black or Indigenous, or and may not even know that, like, they might not have accessed a diagnosis. They might have just been written off as like a troublemaker. for seeing things differently. But once a learner disengages, once they feel like the school doesn't support them, that their teachers don't like them, that they aren't doing well, it is very hard to, unless they have a really supportive environment and teachers who are actively working on this, that becomes part of their academic mindset, how they see themselves as a learner, how they their relationship to school and learning in general. It's like stifling their curiosity.
And of course, this cycles into they're not feeling really good, and so therefore they're seen by the outsiders as being problematic, and see what happens when you try and treat these, and it just gets worse and worse and worse.
And if all the punishments are things like suspensions and expulsions, they're missing school, they're missing concepts. It's like it's so hard to catch up.
And I know this is a much bigger problem in the United States, but with the huge number of single parent families, especially of BIPOC children, that suspension means these kids are unsupervised. Like when they're not in school, they've got no parental stuff. The community is very often not as engaged in positive ways, and that just becomes worse and worse and worse.
And I think sometimes for neurodivergent students, if they're suspended and school's already like a site of trauma for them, they don't like being there. Being at home is like such a relief. It can also lead to more things that cause suspensions, right? It's like, I just want to be at home. If I do this again, I can be in my safe place, because schools are not always safe places, despite everyone's best intentions.
And I know you and I get that question when we do our IEP workshops almost every year. How do I get my kid to school? And it's that encouragement of finding a safe space and creating this, trying to allow the student to create the safe space with some support at the school, how important that is. And
rapport with teacher, like the positive rapport with one adult makes all the difference.
So, okay, let's flip into a direct question. Do you agree that we should continue to have special schools? And let's be very specific about this. Do you agree that we should have special schools for those with learning and cognitive challenges, which is kind of the main, if people on the street, when you think special school, that's the kind of thing we're talking about. And including, let's talk about that one. Let's take the deaf, blind, and mobility challenge.
That's such a hard question. So I'm thinking of, in the case of like deaf, blind, I see so much value to having, teachers should be specially trained no matter what, but to being in a setting where everyone learns in a similar way and need to learn similar things. It's hard because I don't love the idea of like charter schools starting and extreme fractures in public education. But I also know if I had a child right now who needed additional supports and wasn't getting it in the current system, I would not enroll them in public education. If I was lucky enough to be able to afford that as an option, that's another issue, right? Special schools.
And isn't that wonderful for you and I as teachers to say that?
Yeah.
That's terrible.
I feel like, exactly. I feel like until we have better supports and understanding of how to do inclusive education, I could never say we need to close all the other programs. Would I like us to have smaller class sizes in public education, have time and resources, have, consultations with the Braille teacher, and have access to things to support every student, and to embed them into the whole class setting so that everyone's kind of understanding, okay, I can ask for the bathroom by using sign language, or everyone can use a communication board. Like, the things are there for everyone. That is the ideal. That is what I would like to happen. We aren't there yet.
And here's the pragmatic. I don't think we are going to go back to the schools of 100 kids, classes of 10. Mm-hmm. And it's quite funny. Funnily enough, I'm giving a music presentation in a couple of weeks at the school, not too far away from here, and they have an enrollment of 23.
Oh wow! What?
And they invited the orchestra I'm playing with, and like we have more than 23 people. So it's like the orchestra would be bigger than the number of students, which actually there's an advantage of that. And so to me, that's like 23. And these are, I think they want to go grades 1 to 12, but I think they've got grade 1 to 6 going at the moment. And I just read about another school, obviously private, who are, they only want 30 kids in the school, and the classrooms are all integrated because this person running the school thinks that having many years, it's like the old country one-room schoolhouse. Yeah. And look, I have to say, like, sometimes that thing fills me with horror. The thought of having multiple years. I mean, let's say 1 to 12, grades 1 to 12 in one classroom. That terrifies me. But then I also see some things of the giving the older students leadership skill.
Yes. To
handle the younger students and to tutor and to help. That's actually. That's interesting. That's a kind of interesting approach. Anyway, make the pragmatic. I think in the public system and in most private systems, we're not going to have 10 kids in a classroom, and just we were having schools in every block. Much as that sounds like great fun, and so I so want inclusive education. I so want integrated education, but I still see that there are going to be a small number of students who need that not integrated.
Okay,
go on.
I was just going to say, going back to your original point, which was that, like, let's try and make that as narrow as possible. How many people need the special schools?
I was just going to say that the one thing that has always hit me with the utopian view that I want it to happen. I have a friend who was teaching grade 1 who had to leave her school because there was a student who would be throwing chairs at her every day. And the teacher was terrified of being badly injured by a kid in grade 1. And there was no support. And I don't mean the school was as supportive as they possibly can, but you cannot have a 6-year-old throwing chairs at everybody all the time. You spend your entire time trying to protect everybody. Nothing's going to happen at all. And the child is not going to, no one's going to work out what's wrong, what's going off in this little child's head.
Yes.
That child needed full-time EA support in an area where they could be regulated. Actually, I'm just thinking of Greg's 3 stages. That child needs to be completely trusting and be regulated before they even get onto a classroom, and it's not happening. And every time I tell this story, last couple of times I've told this story, I've had other teachers going, "Oh, yes, I had a class like that as well." And it's just like, okay, we need to integrate. That's not fair because my friend is being hurt. and the other students are getting nothing.
Yeah.
And they're terrified. And so,
and that must be stressful on the student as well, who's throwing chairs. Like they're having difficulty in the environment.
Well, and of course, I should have said that. My
yes,
first thought, of course, is with that student.
That.
But it's also then everybody's
losing out.
Yeah.
Everybody's stressed. Everybody's sort of in that lizard brain mode, right? Going into brown brain all the time.
And so the idea then of closing, like in Australia, closing all special schools, what's the solution for that student?
And I think that's where my concern is. It's like, yes, I would be completely in favor of only inclusive education if we knew how to do it and if we had what we needed to do it right. In Ontario, we're moving to like a streamed grade 9 in certain courses, but I don't know that high school teachers were given any resources or told how to do this, or any PD on this, because they might have been teaching university level language or math for years and years and years, and now they have to figure out how to differentiate and do the things we do in elementary school without the support. Like, we can't just mandate things, close things, have vast changes, vast numbers of students, and students with in many cases complex needs as well, without helping the teachers understand how to meet those needs.
And this concept of governments, and I'm not even going to be critical particularly of that particular one of which you're talking about, because it does happen almost everywhere, of governments just mandating changes
in general, yeah,
and they're not talking to the teachers.
No, ever. We're never consulted.
So what's your thought about gifted education?
Okay.
Or GATE?
So I'm of multiple minds here as well. In general, as someone who was a gifted learner myself, but I didn't go to a gifted program, teachers were able to meet my needs in the inclusive classroom setting. Sometimes I read a more challenging book, like I read 1984 while my grade 8 class was reading Animal Farm. And I had one great teacher where we did a lot of like project-based learning. So I just did more complex, interesting things to me. And I wasn't even really aware that I was doing things that were too different from other people, though in retrospect, I was. Like, no one said you're doing this because you're gifted. You know what I mean? But it is a lot easier to accommodate and gifted learners in the general classroom setting, giving them more resources, more sources to read. Like if they're learning about history, they can read more primary sources. They, more enrichment, because they can tend to grapple with greater sources of information. They tend to have better memories. They're able to connect to like a lot more background knowledge just by virtue of how their brains work. I have also read a lot of research about how gifted learners don't do that well in the long run compared to anybody else.
Yeah.
Right. So because often they don't learn about productive struggle in education, which is another Zaretta Hammond concept, this idea of productive struggle, that we all fall into this learning pit. Part of learning is getting stuck. And the gifted learners might not hit that point until they're in university and suddenly they're floundering and they think they're stupid because they've never learned that that's part of learning. And there's so many hopes pinned on the gifted learner, like by the family, by all these things. You're supposed to do this, you're supposed to do this. And they can burn out really easily. They can suffer from anxiety, depression. And like anxiety is a huge risk factor because you're grappling with so many more ideas. You're seeing the broad patterns of things. I have had a play. So there are both withdrawal-based gifted programs where maybe you go one day a week and do some things. And I had a placement when I was learning to be a teacher in a congregated gifted class, which was really fascinating because it's a gifted program where all of it's a full-time program So they're getting the regular curriculum, but you are doing all that stuff that I was talking about, enriching, going through things more quickly because you can. And what was really interesting was it looked like other than the fact that, like, obviously their math skills far surpass mine, and we had really wonderful, rich discussions. The cross section of the class, like, it looked like any other class. You had disengaged learners. You had, you know what I mean? Like you had all the personality types. These aren't all just like keen students. It's like any other classroom where you have to work to build relationship and find ways to engage them, because not everyone's engaged in the same way. So it's not doing one thing is meeting the needs of all of the learners in the room. It was the same as inclusive education, frankly. I think what I always think is, who wouldn't benefit from project-based learning and experiential learning? Like, this is the stuff that would engage the learners that are disengaged. But I do think it goes back to neoliberalism, because who do we value? We value who is perceived to be future contributors to the economy. So that's why in a budget crisis, gifted programs almost never get cut. It's always like special education programs. It's reading recovery. It's things like that, but not gifted.
Full disclosure, same as probably everyone can guess, I also did not go to a GATE program, but if there was such a thing back when I went to school, I probably would have been put into one. And in fact, my first teaching experience outside of music school was teaching in a GATE school. And I see a lot of advantages, but here are the things. I see a lot of advantages at the STEM. I can see a lot of advantages at teaching maths, teaching especially computer science, teaching probably even more advanced sciences. And let's add our real love of performance arts. I did a workshop this morning at my son's school. I was asked to come and help the big band, and I keep telling people how my schooling was so special, and I didn't realize it. I just thought everybody was like that. Because I was given the chance to learn any instrument, to have lessons on any instrument I wanted, to play. We had 3 orchestras, 2 concert bands, a couple of jazz bands. I was encouraged to write music for these ensembles. I ended up being the music director, assistant music director for the grade 12 music hall. And we wrote all the arrangements. And there's I just think that's what everybody gets. But that is actually a GATE music program.
Yeah.
And I noticed that, with my years of teaching in music programs, both here and back in Alberta, you'd get these special kids, these kids who are really super talented, who are just not fitting into the music programs because the music programs, are very big and liberal, wide, but there's still levels above that you just can't, most of the school programs can't handle. And I've seen that at the same time in, I was fortunate to work at the best drama school in Alberta.
Yeah.
Most amazing teacher, because she could take people who were professional level. There are 2 or 3 kids I easily could have walked on stage and were fantastic, and they fit into the program because she could be flexible. And here's my big point, because there was a point to all this. Do we have enough teachers taught GATE specialty? Because it's you need to be a special teacher to teach a gifted program. You need to be a special teacher to integrate those kids with lots and lots of learning challenges. There's a lot of things you need to be taught. So,
and here, this is a whole other debate, but here in Ontario, and I imagine it's similar in other places, as long as you have a Part 1 special education course, you can teach any program, any specialized program. I think most teachers who accept jobs will probably also take courses of their own volition. You know, if I were assigned to teach gifted now, although I definitely have some ideas of how I would do it, I would still pursue professional development in my summers and try to make sure that I was keeping up and absorbing like what's coming out in the field as sort of recommended places to start and how to do things and really understand the learning profile. I am a big believer in general, well, not even in general, I'm a big believer that every child is entitled to the appropriate level of support and challenge.
And that involves, actually, this just struck me. Of course, 100% agree. Of course. What we're missing in all this is that involves teachers being given that education.
And also understanding like there's twice exceptional students. And this is a profile that's very difficult for many teachers to understand. I guess I'm one of them as well, right? Like those extreme splinter skills. I have always been very gifted as a writer, as, like language arts, drama have been history, things like that. I'm great with. I can perspective take my little face off. I'm so good at that kind of thing. But math, I stopped understanding math in grade 5. I don't know how to do long division. I don't, there was just things that were, and that's just one example of many of things that were just did not, like, they weren't, like my skills are like this, like, and I think learners with sort of a mixed profile or who have additional challenges, maybe like working memory issues, which comes along with executive dysfunction, teachers don't know how to meet their needs or might make assumptions. You know what? I don't think they're really gifted. No, they are gifted. They just might need scaffolding. They might need different ways of organizing their ideas and like understanding what the barriers are that are preventing them from showing you what they know.
And how do you get over those barriers? And this is the,
I'm trying to write a book that sort of gives a little overview about just understanding in general what are barriers learners can come up against. So at each stage of the learning, and like what are the things that we can do and how can we be prepared to offer these things to everyone who needs them, whether or not they have an identification. Because so as you and I know, so many students never get identified with a label, but still are struggling with things.
And you bring up twice exceptional and multiple exceptionalities, and that's the problem with even those who get labeled. And actually, from a teaching perspective, I'm quite happy with the label in a very neutral way.
It gives you a hypothesis of what might be hard and what some general supports could be, but that's not the end of it, right? Like,
in a very positive way, a label is great. Just don't let the negatives get to you. Okay, cool. But so often a child with multiple exceptionalities, the most disabling is the one that gets paid attention to and not the other. There was a couple of students many, many years ago, recent immigrants from China that were in a school in Melbourne where I was teaching. Yeah. And these kids, they knew the curricula, but they couldn't speak English. And this is, they were in an integrated program that wasn't any, and I think the teacher, because obviously I'm looking at them as music students, but the teacher, there was some understanding of the language. So there was a communication thing, but everybody was concentrating on their language. And what these kids did in the 2 or 3 years is their academics were going lower and lower and lower because no one was paying attention to that because the language was most important. And this is tricky. Mm-hmm. It's tricky to balance this from a teacher. And it's tricky to balance it if you've got 30 kids and 10 of them have multiple exceptionalities. Like that's just,
yeah. I think some of it, at least as you get older, as children get older, is having choice built in, because students usually pick a choice that is something they feel capable of doing. They will sometimes pick the so-called easy way out, but don't we all sometimes? Like that's our right as well as human beings. But generally they pick an appropriate level of challenge for themselves.
You're getting back to and you know perfectly well you do this. They're getting the students to mark their own work.
Well, not even just mark their own work, but if you have very clear criteria of this is what I need everybody to show by the end of the unit, there's multiple pathways for how to do that. You know, there's multiple ways to, like you might have some students who write a song, who do a PowerPoint, who create a Scratch animation, who, you know, like it's so much more interesting as a teacher too, when you do things that way. I had my grade 8 teacher, I remember this, and I wish I'd paid more attention at the time, but I didn't know I was going to be a teacher. But he had a whole program, and it was for science, it was for math, and it was for language as well, where there were a number of challenges in a book, and you had to add up to a certain number. So let's say the number was 3, you could do one level 3 task and get the 3 points. Or you could do 3 smaller tasks, or you could do like a 2 and a 1, you know, you got to choose your challenge.
I'd be going 3 all the time, but yes.
I pretty much did 3 all the time too. Yeah. Maybe not in math. Math, I probably was like, let's do all the ones. But like that was a system where you weren't comparing yourself to other people. Everyone's doing different things. And I'm sure that there were other parts to it too. Like if he saw you were always picking the level 1s, he might challenge you the next time to, why don't you do a 2 and a 1? You know, I bet things like that were weaved in as well. But that choice is really important, keeps learners more interested and more invested, because they had a say in what they're producing and how they're showing what they know and practicing what they are learning. Like it's definitely possible. We just have to show people how it's possible and how it could work, and how it could work in, you know, like a social studies classroom versus a language classroom versus a, you know, just that what could it be like?
It's interesting. I mean, this is not the first time you've mentioned some teachers at your school, and there's a couple examples at my school, and I always use my. He was my general science teacher for a year or two. I can't remember which year, grade 9 maybe, whatever, it doesn't matter. But went to grade 11, 12, because we do 4th semester seniors, they were called back then. Mm-hmm. He was my chemistry teacher, and he was really, really good. But we had a math teacher who had to leave, unfortunately. And he was asked to teach math, and his math weren't very good. He was a brilliant teacher. So what he did was he told us all, I haven't taught this, so let's go through this together. And he would be maybe a week in front of us. Yeah. And when he didn't find something, we would just get together as groups and do and solve it. And there was one guy, Kenton, who's now a math professor he's a math professor at Stanford or something. Like he's just like he was a math genius. He was so good. And you know, having a kid like that in class, he would know. He would be coaching us and the teacher. Yeah. And it was a fantastic learning environment. Yeah. And the other example I have is my English teacher in grade 12, who was a grumpy old bee, but allowed me to do like an opera for an essay.
Awesome.
And I wrote a story, and I wrote music for the story, and you know, we had a negotiation that, you know, maybe it was let's say 2,000-word essay. Mm-hmm. I could write 1,000-word, but they had to write music for it. He allowed me to write a descriptive essay on a chess game, which I wrote 15 pages. Wow! He said it was really terrible, but he couldn't believe that anybody. And you know what? That's the beauty of it. He gave me the choice. It actually wasn't a great essay, and I shouldn't have. It was a bad thing for me to pick, mm-hmm. but he let me find out why it was bad and what was good, but then also said he didn't think anybody could write 15 pages descriptively on a chess game. And so like there was a credit, some reality check. And it's just, this is maybe we just need to get a big resource of these teacher stories.
Mm-hmm. I like that idea.
Yeah, this is almost like, and you know, much as your math skill is still, I can't comprehend it just because math is so naturally for me, and that's fine. It's a double empathy problem here, right? I think that if you had to teach a grade 10 math class tomorrow for a week, you could do it.
When I did the grade 7 gifted class, I was just like your math teacher, and I just said, I'm terrible at this. I've looked this over. I think I understand. Here's the challenge. Let me know what you think. Like, and it was very much, we learned at the same time, and they often surpassed my knowledge, and they could explain how it worked, you know?
But you've got enough, your breadth as a teacher still allowed you to put whatever structures were involved and had strategies when there were problems.
Oh, and I can create really engaging opportunities to examine a problem and solve that problem. And, you know, whether or not I can do the solving myself without the textbook, I can't. I know how to teach, and I know how to create learning opportunities.
I've always hated that saying, those who can do, those who can't teach.
Yeah. When research shows the opposite, like just having subject knowledge does not a good teacher make.
And quite honestly, in my old profession, so many musicians call themselves teachers with they have no pedagogical background. They have no interest in pedagogy. They have no interest in anything other than they're really, really good players. Mm-hmm. Parents would often see, oh, this guy's really, really good. He's a great player, must be a great teacher. And they're not. No disrespect to anybody listening, but I would have said it to your face anyway. And and there's nothing wrong with that. Like that's the thing. That there's the, I think in the performing arts specifically, there is a devaluing of the teacher.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's going on a global scale. It's tied to neoliberalism.
I'm trying not to say that this week, but neoliberalism. Yeah. Okay. So there you go. There's our hour. To wrap this up, I would love to continue this conversation with some input from caregivers, maybe. Mm-hmm. Or somebody who teaches in a special school.
Okay, I have the perfect person. I'll ask her. I have a dear friend. We reconnected recently. We went to high school together. She's neurodivergent. Her entire family is neurodivergent. She is a teacher, and now she's working in a community setting. But her child, she pulled out of the public education to give them the best education possible. So I'll see if she's wanting to join us, because she brings several perspectives, and teacher and as a parent, and seeing the benefit for her child in being in that smaller setting, that more understanding setting.
You know, it's interesting. I don't think we've talked about autism enough today. And please, for the listeners and watchers, it's an extension of what we're saying. Autistic individuals tend to be seen as special education. And everything we say about autism, ADHD, schizophrenia, learning challenges, cognitive challenges, this is a universal thing. I think this is one of these problems about the concept of a special school only being for a certain subset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when so many people need specialized support, we just need to be better at doing that at schools, at inclusive schools. Yeah, and not to fault the teachers at all, because they're doing more with less all the time. They're always expected to do more with less. we have to change the system so that teachers can support the learners in front of them, have the time to plan adequately, have the time to engage in professional development that they choose, that's relevant to their classroom concerns, have, colleagues and mentors that they can bounce ideas off of. Like the time is such a huge factor, giving teachers time so that they can be ready for all of the students and all of the needs and plan for them adequately and understand what's going on and think about it from all of these lenses. But I think that's where I would like to see us move, is where we are ready. We expect everyone to be there. We know how to plan for a range of needs so that when they walk through our classroom door at the beginning of the year, they already see that there are supports in place for them, that they are being welcomed and supported from day one, not just when they say, hey, I need something different, because they might not say that.
And I want to emphasize the one thing that you certainly have raised earlier in our conversation that I wasn't thinking about enough is that expansion of cultural awareness as well. We've talked about, you and I have talked about how often there are a number of cultural communities across the country here who are resistant to acknowledging autism, and how we have to help open that up, yet still understanding that this is not. There's a deep connection for this. There's a deep connection for the reason certain caregivers specifically from different cultural backgrounds may not accept autism as much. And so to help break that down, which then flips into, as a teacher, we need to be sensitive to some of those things as well. And I'm thinking, communication styles, cultural communication styles.
Hey, that's another great thing out of Zaretta Hammond's book, which I will definitely link in the show notes. She talks about how 80% of the world's cultures are collectivist, and that there are some general trends in collectivist cultures that we can bring into our classrooms to better engage learners.
Rather than the
because their brains are already primed. Their brains are already primed by their community practices to respond to, like, bringing in rhythm and music and I'm just certain things that I'm remembering from the book, call and response, storytelling. Their brains are really good at understanding knowledge transmitted through some of these modalities. And it's going to help the majority of students if we bring that in.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to continuing this part 2 of this conversation at some point, whether or not it's our next episode or a few down the line. But, I always love discussing education with you and some of the problems that we have in education. But I think we need to envision better ways of doing things so that people get thinking about it and we start trying to enact it in small ways and hopefully larger ways.
I love also that you and I both are bringing a pragmatic view to this, that you and I both want a certain thing, that there's a reality that it's either not going to happen or it's not going to happen for a long time. And so therefore we have to be more open to,
All right. Well, thank you, Bruce. Thank you, listeners, for sticking with us as always. And we hope you have a wonderful 2 weeks until we see you again then. Take care. Be well.
Bye.
Autism.